If you think you know everything about Minecraft, think again, because in this video I'll show you 20 things you probably definitely did not know about Minecraft. Of course, if you take an azalea bush and bone meal it, it'll grow into a large azalea tree, and generally when I'm doing this I just harvest it with shears so that I can get these leaves to plant them somewhere else. However, if you were going to harvest one of these naturally, by just breaking all the oak logs that are inside of it, you might notice something interesting, which is that the azalea leaves decay. But not only do they decay, unlike let's say the mangrove leaves, if you break it with a fortune hoe, or even just let it naturally decay, something you may notice is that we're actually getting from these leaves some azalea plants. Now you get the standard azalea bushes from the standard azalea leaves when they decay, as of course a chance. So you can see, for instance right here, we're going to break a really large number of these flowering azalea leaves. We got 8 of the flowering azalea plants from just a couple of the leaves. Now the mangrove swamp's main feature is of course the mangrove trees, and the way they generate, if some of the mangrove roots here generate inside of the mud blocks, you will get muddy mangrove roots, which by the way the fastest tool for the mangrove roots that are muddy is actually the shovel and not the axe. And there's a lot of crazy things about the muddy mangrove roots. For instance, you can place them sideways like this, up and down, orienting them just like a log, unlike let's say the roots here where they can only have their texture have these lines going upwards. But what's also interesting is that if you craft it with mud, you can actually place in a shapeless recipe mud and mangrove roots in the crafting grid to craft yourself the muddy mangrove roots with a very logical recipe, 1 mud block and 1 mangrove root block, giving you 1 muddy mangrove roots. So if you ever decide that muddy mangrove roots are your new favorite building block, you can craft those by simply getting the naturally corresponding ingredients found inside of this biome. Now Minecraft's item art style is fairly consistent, and something you may or may not have noticed is that every single item that's sort of long always goes from the bottom left corner of the square to the top right corner, always going that angle and never the opposite direction. You can see that on everything from arrows to tools to even just name tags or items like the pork chop that are not exactly square. They always have that when they have the one side be in the bottom left and the other side be in the top right, except for one item, the echo shard. And you might be looking at the echo shard right now and it doesn't look too weird, but let's compare it to another type of block that's very similar, the amethyst shard. You do notice that's going in the opposite direction, and it goes in the opposite direction of literally every single item in the entire game that goes that way. And I'm not sure if this was actually intentional or not, but regardless of that, what it says to me is that the echo shard is an incredibly alien item, something that does not come from the overworld. Now of course the first step to brewing in Minecraft is always the same, but what happens if you skip turning these into a usable potion effect and put in one of the modifiers straight away? What I find to be incredibly interesting is making splash water bottles. For instance, let's say a mob is on fire, if you throw a splash water bottle at it, it'll actually put that mob out. But as well as that, if you throw it at a blaze, it damages the blaze and is a fairly decent weapon against it. But why stop at splash water bottles? Add a potion of dragon's breath and get yourself some lingering water bottles. And it doesn't really work that well if you throw it on the ground. You don't actually have a big pool of water just stay there for a while, like let's say it normally would with a potion effect, but you still can technically make those. And I think my favorite of all is the fact that if you take those lingering water bottles and combine them with arrows in the crafting grid, you can literally make what's known as an arrow of splashing, or basically a completely useless tipped arrow. Campfires are one of those items in Minecraft that have a lot more uses to it than you would think. So for example, if you right click on a campfire with a shovel, it'll be put out and then you sort of have this interesting decorational item on the ground. But there's actually a lot of really interesting ways of making this campfire be lit again, instead of just let's say right clicking on it with flint and steel or breaking it and placing it. So for example, if we get out an anvil and we enchant a bow with the flame enchantment, and then shoot standard arrows with it, we can actually reignite campfires by hitting them with our flame arrows. But it is a really fun and realistic use of this enchantment that of course a flaming arrow could be used to reignite this campfire. This could definitely be placed into a different contraption to make it more interesting. So for instance, an observer facing towards one of these campfires, then if you shoot one of those campfires with an arrow from super far away, that campfire will light, and then from that it can send a signal to do whatever you want. Minecraft's forest forests, rolling hills, plains, oceans, and all the other biomes inside of it are all somewhat realistic to real life and definitely give Minecraft this feel of being a simplified version of the Earth. In fact, so much so that there is only 2 biomes in the entire overworld that are not in real life. And of course the first one is the one I'm walking on right now. That is the Mushroom Fields, also known as the Mushroom Island. And this biome was added to the game a long time ago, so I'm not exactly sure what made the developers decide to add an unnatural biome to the game, until in Minecraft 1.19, the Deep Dark. Now the Deep Dark not being natural to real life makes a lot of sense, because I'm definitely sure that the lore around the Deep Dark is supposed to be that's sort of corrupting and trying to take over the lower parts of Minecraft's overworld. Definitely the way that it works, by having other blocks being converted into it, it should be seen as a parasitic biome. If a mob or player is given the invisibility effect, they completely disappear. Even if you also have the invisibility effect, that mob, entity, or player just cannot be seen anymore. As you can of course see right here, for instance, we have a massive number of mobs that have just disappeared. But what if I told you that inside of spectator mode, all of these mobs suddenly turn visible? You'll in fact see right here, we can see a strange ghostly outline of all these mobs. For instance, these 2 frogs here are something as large as the cows, and I think the only reason why this is that if you right click on the mob, then of course you can know it's there and you can see things through their eyes as you can normally, and so because they retain that little bit of visibility, you can have that as a decent way of knowing where those invisible mobs are. And this does work the exact same with players or entities or anything else that you can give invisibility to. You might have noticed if you play Minecraft Java Edition that you go into a cave that you just found, the game is in hard difficulty, and you see basically no mobs. Then why is it that, let's say later on in the game, you go to a super small cave and it's literally full with hundreds and hundreds of hostile mobs? Well, it's because of an interesting effect known as local difficulty. Now local difficulty is a background effect, which means the longer you're in an area for, the more difficult it becomes, the more mobs can generate in that area, but as well as that some other things change as well. So for instance, the percentage of mobs that can pick up and hold items is made much higher, and you have to be really careful about that because let's say you died in an area that has a high local difficulty, also of course known as an area that you've been in for a very long time, then some of your items could be picked up by the zombies or skeletons that are around there. Minecraft 1.19 of course introduced the frog, but you may not know as much about this funny mob as you think. One thing kind of interesting about the frogs is although they do tend to like being outside the water, if they do go into the water, they actually have a really complicated swim animation. So for instance, you can see this frog right here when in the water actually has its feet and its legs move in motion like that. What's also pretty funny about frogs is that they will tend to try and jump and land on a lily pad when they jump. So for instance, these frogs right here are all centered around this lily pad, but if we put the lily pad over here, some of these frogs could definitely try and jump over to it, or try and land in a different area where there is a lily pad sitting down. I think it's so funny how Mojang chose to, let's say, add an interesting swim animation to the frog, but then other mobs in the game like the drown don't even have a swim animation inside of Java, although they do in Bedrock. Now I'm sure that basically everyone who's watched this video has ran into one of these at one point, the Desert Pyramid, also known as the Desert Temple. Now these generate fairly frequently inside of the sand biomes, and there's nothing really weird about the game calling this a desert temple or a desert pyramid, is it? As of course the main structure of it is fairly pyramid shaped. However, something that definitely is very strange is this. This is the Jungle Temple, but that's not actually what it's called. This is technically known as the Jungle Pyramid. Now I have literally no idea why this is called the Jungle Pyramid because it looks nothing like a pyramid in any way, but the strange sort of fact and mystery to me is why this is known in the code as a jungle pyramid. Maybe when this is first being added, the developers had the idea to make this be sort of like a Mayan pyramid shaped structure. However, the final product we got looks nothing like that, as right now when you're locating something, it's still being typed in as a jungle pyramid. Fences are a really great way of adding decoration to a build, and Minecraft has 10, soon to be 11 different types of them in the game. Every single fence is made out of wood, except for one type, and that is the nether brick fence, which are crafted with a 2x2 of nether bricks, and the nether brick fences can be made by having these blocks on either side, with the nether bricks in between to sort of connect them, as if these nether bricks are playing the role of the sticks. And you'll of course notice here all the fences connect to each other, making some really nice and colorful patterns, but they will not connect to the nether brick fences. You'll in fact notice that right here, we can fully surround this on every single side with the nether brick fences, and no matter what we do, this just will not connect to the other fences. However, you can use the fact that the nether brick fence does not connect to the other fences as a really cool build element. So for instance, right here, we can make a super small thin little tunnel that we can actually walk down here between these two fences. I would say the most often forgotten about item in the entire game is glow lichen. The glow lichen generates in basically every single type of cave, and it sort of seems to be a fairly useless item, although it does add a little bit of light to an area, and it is definitely nice to have some light in the caves, as for instance right here, all we can literally see that glows things up is over here. There's some of the glow lichen on the walls there. However, there's a lot more you can do with glow lichen than just let it sit on a wall, adding light to caves. Now the great thing about glow lichen is it's super easy to collect with shears. The other thing that makes this a really amazing item is that it's not destroyed by, but it does instantly block lava and water. So for instance, as you can see right here, with just a couple pieces of glow lichen that are really hard to pick out, we can have that lava go in any shape we want. Or for instance, right over here with this water, let's say we don't like what it's doing, we can simply go to a certain area of that, place down some glow lichen in a row, and stop that water from flowing and make it drain out. Something I love about Minecraft is the fact that sheep breeding makes sense. Let's say we take a gray sheep and breed it with a white sheep. What do we get from that? Well, you'd assume light gray, and that is what happens. We have right here a little light gray baby sheep. So let's say we dye a sheep red and then we dye a sheep yellow. Kind of changes their DNA in a sense that they always grow that type of wool. We can then breed the yellow sheep with the red sheep, and we have an adorable baby orange sheep. And this works with literally any single dye crafting recipe in the entire game. However, unfortunately with pets, so let's say some tamed wolves or maybe some tamed cats, the color is not a genetic trait. So let's say for instance right here we have a dog with a blue collar and this one has a white collar. You'd assume both of those mixing would give us a light blue collar. Well, let's turn these both into breeding mode and see what happens. The baby dog or wolf has a red collar. Powder snow is a somewhat new danger that players have to deal with in Minecraft 1.18 and onwards. And I think most players are aware of the fact that if you wear some piece of leather armor, you can literally just walk right over the powder snow and not have an issue with it. But honestly, something a lot better than just bringing around some stupid leather boots is carrying around a bow that has the flame enchantment or also a water bucket. That flaming arrow can instantly destroy powdered snow blocks that it goes through. As you can see right here, you can use this to clear out large areas of the powder snow. The other great method is the fact that water will instantly destroy any powder snow that it touches. So let's say we go into a big area of powder snow and we place down a water bucket. You'll notice as that water flows over the powder snow, it will simply delete it as it flows over that area, making this entire place be turned from snow into dirt. A funny fact about Enderman is that they actually have the Silk Touch enchantment on their hands. And you can tell this because Enderman can pick up grass blocks. For instance, this one right here, you can see it has a grass block inside of its hands with the standard grass block texture. And of course you can't pick up a grass block unless you break it with Silk Touch. As with your fist, it just breaks into dirt. So apparently Endermen are able to be very careful with the blocks that they pick up. They can even pick up things like flowers, or in the Nether, the Silk Touch only warped and crimson nylium. Also, as another fairly strange fact and thing that the Enderman can pick up, that is TNT. You'll notice these Endermen have TNT blocks inside their hands, and in fact it seems like they actually like picking up the TNT more than the other items around here, as a bunch of these Endermen have that there. But overall, just funny to see an Enderman holding TNT, as you never see that inside of survival. You might think of dripstone inside of caves to be a fairly boring and useless thing, but it's actually the farthest thing from it. You see, the reason why is that if a trident hits dripstone, or if you honestly just manually break dripstone, you'll notice sometimes you can have these falling pieces of dripstone go onto the ground. And basically, believe it or not, what will happen with this falling piece of dripstone is it causes insane amounts of damage. You saw, for instance, right there, that one falling piece of dripstone instantly killed the pig. But you could even do something like this if you're just above those mobs and you happen to break these blocks, will fall on and instantly get those pigs. But crazy enough, with our full netherite armor, if we are hit directly with one of these falling pieces of dripstone, just like this, you can see we were literally instantly killed in full netherite armor by a singular falling stalactite. If you have a soul sand bubble column like this, you can suspend different things in it. So for instance, we could have an ender pearl that just stays floating in the middle of that forever. But making this much more interesting, the same effect actually works with the fire charge. We just have to do it a little bit differently. Lay down a much larger area of the soul sand, and then to put above it a ring of random temporary blocks. And we'll just put some water blocks around the edges here, just avoiding the 3 blocks in the corners. We'll have a dispenser facing downwards and put fire charges in it, and make that have a bunch of fire charges go into the water, and something pretty crazy will happen, which is if we take a look in the water right here, we actually have some fire charges that are basically having fire that is being propelled and staying inside of the actual bubbles, which I think is definitely pretty crazy, as it's pretty hard in Minecraft to have fire be inside water. Badlands, also known as the Mesa biome, is probably one of the most underrated biomes in Minecraft, but it does have a really interesting feature to it, and that is the fact of the surface level dark oak wood Mesa Mineshafts. Now these Mineshafts obviously have to do with the huge amount of gold that generate around the Mesa biomes, showing the fact that there were miners that were here and could mine ores at really high up levels. There's only 3 structures in the entire game that have biome dependent features to them. So the first one is of course villages, and that one is fairly obvious. The second one is the ruin portals, so for instance a jungle ruin portal would sort of have some leaves around it. And the third one is this, that is the Mesa biome mineshaft. It's actually strange that it is made out of dark oak wood, because although dark oak wood was added in the same update as the Mesa biome mineshaft was, dark oak doesn't really generate anywhere near the Mesa biome. Shields are really great inside of Minecraft because you can use them to defend yourself against all kinds of arrows. Let's say one shot by a skeleton, which of course will bounce right off harmlessly, but then let's say we have a crossbow that has the piercing enchantment on it, and that arrow goes flying into the air. Well, basically the crazy thing is that basically that piercing arrow can go right through our shield. You even see our shield lost quite a bit of durability there. If we let's say let another arrow fly into the air and we try and block it again, you'll notice there'll be a specific sound, and our shield's durability will also go down even lower. So just good to be aware of this inside of PvP. A piercing arrow is like the ultimate weapon that can be used against someone with a shield, because of course generally they're expecting someone who has an axe who can come up to them and use that axe to disable the shield. However, if you have one of these piercing crossbows, you can simply shoot all the way through their shield and they won't even know it hit them. Something you may or may not believe is that inside of Minecraft, the physics are actually calculated in a fairly realistic way. So you can see, for instance, right here, these waves of axolotls are getting smaller and smaller, and I'll show you what that's representing. Basically, if we set up a command block when we're flying, is the pattern that we bounce after we've hit the ground with those axolotls is actually fairly realistic. And you can see right here we have these little bouncing waves that are procedurally getting smaller and smaller and smaller from the massive bounce we made at the beginning. And you can even see right here the pattern happening again with these axolotl waves getting larger and larger and larger. I think a lot of things make people think that Minecraft's physics are fairly unrealistic, but just using this as an example, it's actually crazy how accurate they can be, making these perfect waveforms on the ground. Anyway, that is 20 things you definitely did not know about Minecraft. Now, of course, you might have known about some of these things, and if you did, be sure to tell me about it in the comments below. If I was able to show you some new things about the game, be sure to press the like button and subscribe to see more content like this. I will see you in the next one, and have a great day. Goodbye.